Hello everyone, and welcome back to another lesson about Egypt. So today we're going to talk about ancient Egyptian foods and what they ate. The first thing we need to consider when we're talking about what a culture or civilization eats is their location. So the Egyptians lived near the Nile, and because they lived near the Nile, this would suggest that they were able to grow their own crops, because a lot of Egypt had very fertile lands because of the Nile. This would also suggest that they were probably able to rear animals, and so they probably ate meat and raised animals because they were near the Nile. There were fertile lands, there was lots of water, they could grow food for the animals. So in ancient Egypt, for at least 3,000 years that they can tell, the food never really changed. It was kind of just the same thing that they had always been eating. So this is the most common thing that people know, is that they ate bread and beer. So when we talk about beer, it's not the same beer that we drink now. I think maybe in parts of Africa they have a beer that has like a lot more vitamins, and it's like thick. It's almost like a gruel kind of thing. So that is what they drank or ate, and women, children, the elderly, everyone drank it, because it had so many like nutrients in it too. But I did read something that said that when scribes were being educated, they would be warned about beer because of its intoxication properties, obviously. They also ate veggies and fruits and fish, obviously, because they were right next to the Nile, poultry, and other meats, like red meats. Probably one of the most important we've already kind of talked about is beer. They also were known, or were thought of, to use it as like a type of currency, like it was like valuable. So the first beer they think that they brewed was like called like beer bread. I think some people in Egypt actually now still make it. So the bread was baked really lightly so it didn't kill the yeast, and then it was crumbled over a sieve, washed down into a water vat, and left to ferment. So that's how it was made. And in the New Kingdom, they would bake bread into shapes like an obelisk or a goose or something like that. So pretty interesting. Bread. We're still talking talking about bread. Was made of something called emmer wheat. But they could also make it out of other nuts and grains, including barley, tiger nuts, lily seeds, and certain types of roots. So they were very inventive. So another important thing is actually wine. Wine was reserved for like high class or pharaohs. This has been known, they actually have, I guess in like Greece, they have a list of ancient Egyptian, like a depiction of ancient Egyptian wine recipes, and they include grapes, plums, and pomegranates. Most Egyptians, however, did drink fruit juices. So that's interesting. We know, and this is actually depicted quite a lot in Egyptian like pyramid paintings and all kinds of art. They definitely raised cattle. So cattle was probably, from what we know from these artworks and information we get from texts, cattle was probably reserved for the elites. But we do know that on like festivals, is what I'm gonna call them, like rituals and like gatherings that they had, that a lot of the time the temples would hand out meats like beef. Also, they would, like, the regular common folk would eat it on like holidays, maybe. So they also raised other types of meats very common to what we raise definitely here in America. They also had goats, sheep, pigs, and they also had poultry, quite a few. Pigs, they didn't start eating until after the Greco-Roman, oh my gosh, period, because pigs were often associated with Set and considered unclean, which are very, very clean. We know now. So, cows, so cattle, so female cows were not eaten because they're associated with Isis, and she is like a female cow in a lot of her depictions of her. But unfortunately, they sacrificed a lot of male cattle. Poultry. There were geese, ducks. All of these things are adorable, by the way. Pigeons, quails, cranes. Jeez. Flamingos, pelicans, doves, and more. It goes on. All kinds of people could eat poultry. It wasn't reserved just for the elites. They were also known to eat like mice and hedgehogs. So fish, obviously, was a huge source of food, and they usually dried and salted it. I don't know if they ate it fresh too, but there's a lot of evidence of dried salted meat in Egypt. There's also something, it's considered an aphrodisiac, and I can't pronounce the name, but it's like fish ovaries pressed, and they would eat that. So they also ate other kinds of protein, like legumes, cheese, milk, butter, and eggs. So they had a lot of different kinds of foods they could eat. So one mystery to archaeologists, which is really funny, is how they prepared their legumes, so beans, chickpeas, lentils, things like that. They believe they probably just made a stew with it, with like what they had at their disposal. So yeah, they just think that they probably made it into a stew. So veggies were, most common was green onions, delicious, and garlic, celery, lettuce, cucumber, and like melons and gourds. So like squash and pumpkins and things like that. The most common fruits figs, grapes, dates, pomegranates, palm nuts, and sometimes there's evidence that they also ate berries. After the Greco-Roman period, they also had peaches and pears. That's some of my writing, I'm really sorry. Talking about meals, like the elites probably had 3 meals a day, which consisted of a light breakfast with beer and bread. Oops, I spelled bear. And bread. And then a little bit of a heavier lunch, possibly also with beer and bread. And then they would eat a full dinner. From what they found, the common folk would eat a light breakfast that consisted of bread. Then they would eat like a midday meal that consisted of bread and some beer, that like some veggies, mostly onions. I think I used to be an Egyptian because I love onions and garlic. And maybe some dried fish or something. So maybe like some fish. So one more thing about this is I'm just gonna put a star over here. There was no like gender roles that they know of when it comes to preparing food. So women would cook food at home. Some of the men would cook or make their own food, like out in the fields. It's just what I'm reading, people. And so they would both do cooking, kind of like here in America today. Both men and women do a lot of cooking. I actually cook in my house, though. My husband, he can cook if he has to, but he doesn't have to. So another star. They would also do fasting rituals that had religious significance, and so it was kind of like why people fast today. I'm pretty sure in the Jewish religion you fast. Christianity, sometimes people fast. That's all I know for sure, so it's actually not that many. I don't want to like say things that might not be true. But yeah, they would also not eat as a display of spiritual devotion. So people do that here. So we're going to talk about one more thing, and that's like their feasts and banquets. especially after they would do like fasting, they would have feasts, which were meant to celebrate joyous occasions. So the banquet would start in the afternoon and could go on for many hours. The unmarried or unpaired men and women would separate. And also, depending on your class, that depends on where you would sit. So elites would sit in chairs, like the middle class, I guess you could say. The commoners. That's probably more accurate. They would sit like on stools. And then the poor would sit on the floor. And they would have like, because that many people, it would probably get smelly in there. So they would have like incense and burning oils or fats to kind of cover the smell. So during these, massive amounts of food were served. That would consist of bread, obviously, roasted and grilled meats, like stews, fresh fruits and veggies. And they actually had like cakes baked with dates, so I'm gonna say date cakes. With honey. Interesting. They would also have like entertainment, so they would have musicians and dancers. I'm gonna be honest, that sounds like a really good time. Can you imagine going back in time and being invited to an ancient Egyptian feast? Wild. That's crazy. So that's all we're going to talk about today, about ancient Egyptian foods. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you in the next video.